Hello, everyone. So good to see all of you. Welcome to Buddha Center. My name is Jeff Allen. This evening, we are going to be talking about the three principal paths and how we need all of them in order to become a Buddha. And we're going to look at some sources for that. But before we get started, let's do what we always do to set a proper motivation before the teaching. Let's get into a suitable sitting posture that will allow our mind to be clear. One of those postures is called the 7-point Vairocana posture. And this is a posture that many great yogis and meditators have gotten into in order to be able to sustain their meditations in terms of length of time. It aligns all of the channels and so forth to where they should be, so they operate in their most efficient format. All of our blood is allowed to flow in the proper manner. And if we can get used to sitting in a position like this, it will allow us to, when we can with our mind, sit for longer periods of time. Our body won't become a hindrance to that. So we get into the 7-point Vairocana posture with our legs in the cross-legged position, preferably the Vajra posture, our hands in our lap with our right on top of our left, making a diamond making kind of a diamond. Our back straight, it says like a stack of coins. Our shoulders in a comfortable position, allowing for our arms to slightly bow out. The great translator Marpa, Milarepa's teacher, said that the reason his meditations outshined others was his sitting posture. And we see even Asanga says that our sitting posture is so key when we look at our ability to make our mind as clear as it possibly can and kind of avoid some of the duller states and so forth that can arise if we aren't in this really specific posture. So the great masters say it. So this is something that I try to do when I sit in my practice on a daily basis, just to try to mimic the great masters so that eventually I can become one of those beings, because all beings have Buddha nature. Nobody has a lock or is someone who can't become a Buddha. So because I'm someone, I can become a Buddha. So I'd like to do what those beings who have become Buddhas, who have engaged in these practices before me, did in order to achieve their goals. So the 7-point Vairocana posture then becomes very important when we see these great yogis and these great masters, and we hear Lama Tsongkhapa talk about it, and we hear Kamalashila talk about it, and we hear all of these points made by beings that we believe are enlightened beings. So back to the 7-point Vairocana posture. So we have our legs, we have our back, our hands, we have our shoulders in the comfortable posture. We have our head slightly forward, eyes slightly open, pointing at our nose, slightly open so that we aren't distracted by our eyes being open by all the things we see around us, but not closed all the way because we have a tendency to go to sleep when we close our eyes. So that's kind of our familiar patterns. When we close our eyes, it's time to rest, it's time to sleep. Meditation is not time to rest or sleep. Meditation is a time to make your mind brilliantly clear and steady, so that you can see emptiness. So it isn't about getting to a place that's just zoned out. It's about getting to a place that's focused and clear, so that you can ascertain the nature of reality when your mind's calm enough to combine with that wisdom. So that's the real point of what we're doing here. So we want to maintain clarity. We don't want to be sleepy, but we also don't want to be overstimulated. So this is the reason why we have our eyes slightly open, pointed at the tip of our nose, and then we put our mouths into a comfortable position with our tongue on the top of the roof, slightly against the teeth, and we'll begin breathing in and out of our nose. So we breathe all the way to the top of the breath, filling our lungs and our diaphragm, and then very evenly then exhaling all of the breath out. So we know that a certain amount of breath goes in and a certain amount of breath goes out, and we try to do this in a very even fashion. We don't want to breathe in too quickly, because this becomes something that's a distraction, right? If we're hearing all these noises and our bodies making a very quick sudden movements, it's going to cause a distraction. So it's for the reason of not distracting our minds that we keep the breath very, very even, because we're wanting to only focus on the breath, and then when we exhale, the actual counting of the breath. So we're trying to keep our mind only on this focal object, and fighting off kind of the excitement and the laxity or lethargy that can come into our practice, and just trying to be clearly and singly focused on this breathing in and out and the counting. So that's the reasoning behind the evenness of the breath. And the counting is just so that we know that we're mindfully, our mindfulness is there. The object of observation that we've chosen is tied down with mindfulness. And we're making sure that we look with our introspection to see if we're holding that object or not. And if we aren't, then mindfulness brings it back to the object. And the object here is the breathing in and out and the counting of the breaths. So we'll begin with that as our focal object, the breathing in and out, breathing all the way to the top of the breath, filling the lungs and the diaphragm, and then just turning that breath around and exhaling it out and counting 1. Doing the same thing and then counting 2. So we'll begin there. So if everybody just in that 7-point Vairocana posture can begin breathing in and out through your nose, and then we'll add our next visualization to that. Now, as you're continuing to breathe in and out through your nose and counting the breath, imagine that Buddha Shakyamuni, the image of Buddha Shakyamuni, is in the space in front of you, about 2 feet in front of you, eye height, about 2 inches tall, about the size of your thumb. And you're visualizing all of this with your mind. You're not trying to see it with your eyes. You're trying to make this image in front of you very clear. A 3-dimensional being, actual Buddha Shakyamuni, as much as you can imagine him in the space in front of you, in whatever form or image you usually use. So breathing in and out, and seeing the image of Buddha Shakyamuni in the front generation. Focusing only on the breathing in and out. 1, the image of Buddha Shakyamuni in the front generation. Think about how lucky we are to be able to focus on such an amazing being. The only reliable guide is Buddha. Think about how rare it is to be able to think of Buddha, a being who has all the excellent qualities of body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities. A being who's abandoned all faults and has only excellent qualities, who loves you so much, loves every single sentient being so much without bias. Think about the treasure that the Buddha gave the world. Showed us how to end all of our suffering and achieve complete happiness. Think about why we came to the Buddhist teachings. Dissatisfaction, questions, suffering. We came to find an antidote in the Buddha's teachings. The Buddha presented so clearly Now imagine that from the image of Buddha Shakyamuni in the front generation that you're imagining so clearly and so vividly, the entire merit field explodes into the space in front of you. Imagine all of the holy beings, all of the gurus, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. You see Buddha Shakyamuni, you see Kensur Geshe Wandak, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Geshe Dorje Damdu, Geshe Aga, Umzela, Geshe Ma Tenzin Ladrinla, all of these holy beings, Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Imagine any being that you consider to be a holy being in the space in front of you that's just come out of this all-in-one image of Buddha Shakyamuni. And Buddha Shakyamuni was holding the whole merit field. And we just imagine that they're all just in the space in front of us and so happy and full of bliss that we're here and we're doing what it takes in order to become Buddhas. The only thing that Kensur Geshe Wandak, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, all these great beings want is for us to be free from suffering and for us to have complete bliss. And they see us here assembled, and they're so happy because we're finally doing something about our suffering and lack of happiness. And that's all they want us to do. Imagine they're so happy we're doing this. Now imagine that you've brought all sentient beings here. You've led them here to this teaching. Imagine that you've emanated immeasurable, countless amounts of hands and have grabbed all of the hell beings and the 8 hot hells and the 8 cold hells and the surrounding hells. And you've grabbed all of the hungry ghosts and you grab all of the animals. You grab all of the human beings. You think about your friends, neutrals and enemies. You bring them all because you see that those labels are so inconsistent with reality. You bring all beings, humans, all of the demigods and all of the gods, all of those beings who have any kind of remaining obstruction. You bring them all here in order to find out exactly what it will take to finalize each and every one of their paths. So imagine that now the entire merit field explodes with bliss, so much happiness because they see every single sentient being is assembled here. You imagine that none are left out. We do the best we can. Until we're Buddhas, we won't be able to cognize them all completely. But for now, we imagine them in any way that we can and imagine that we've left out none and that they're all here with us. And the gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas are so full of bliss and so happy. And all of a sudden they start to brew or almost bubble off or brew off like a boiling pot is coming out. All kinds of white, red, and blue light rays and nectars you see just coming from this merit field in front of us. Imagine that you and all sentient beings around you have a white Om on your crown, symbolizing your body, a red Ah at your throat, symbolizing your speech, and a blue Hum at your heart, symbolizing your mind. Imagine that you and all sentient beings have these syllables at your crown, throat, and heart. Om, Ah, Hum, respectively. Now imagine that these light rays and nectars start to turn into almost like a shower of rain or almost like a blizzard of snow. And the white light rays and nectars, as they start to come down, transform into white Oms and dissolve into our crowns and all sentient beings' crowns and purify our body. Imagine that red light rays and nectars that are bubbling out of all the gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas are showering down on us and transforming into red Ahs and dissolving into our throats and all sentient beings' throats and transforming our speech into pure speech. Now imagine that from all the bliss that the gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas are experiencing upon seeing all sentient beings assembled here, trying to become Buddhas, the gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas now are bubbling over with blue light rays and nectars that are now snowing, showering down on us and transforming into blue homes and dissolving into our hearts and all sentient beings' hearts and purifying our minds. So imagine this Om, Ah, Hum, white, red, blue, respectively. Om, ah, hom, showering down on us, all sentient beings, and purifying our body, speech, and mind. White, red, blue, light rays and nectars turning into snow. White ohms, red ahs, blue homs, purifying ours and all sentient beings, body, speech, and mind. Imagine that you now have pure body, speech, and mind. Your mind has been transformed into the pure mind, the Vajra mind of the Buddha. Now, continuing to visualize all the gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas, imagine now that we lead them in the prayer of the Heart Sutra. Do it in Tibetan. I'm going to find it. I just decided that right now, so just give me one moment. Sorry for the moment. Okay, so this is the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. We should imagine that we're thinking about the meaning of the Heart Sutra while we're hearing the Tibetan being chanted, thinking about the explicit meaning of the Heart Sutra, which shows us the lack of objective existence of all phenomena, the lack of inherent existence or findable independent self of all phenomena. And then implicitly we find that the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge teaches us the 5 paths. The path of accumulation, the path of preparation, path of seeing, path of meditation, and path of no more learning. So as we're listening to the Heart Sutra, we should think about these paths that we will traverse in order to become Buddhas. And we think about each thing that happens on these paths and recognize that the action, agent, and object of all of this interaction that we're doing as we're progressing through the paths. The path is empty. The person engaging in the path is empty. The goal is empty. We have to really recognize the lack of true establishment of all phenomena, whilst being able to recognize that we traverse these conventional paths of accumulation, preparation, seeing, meditation, and no more learning in order to become Buddhas. So with that in mind, thinking about the lack of true existence, lack of inherent existence of all phenomena, and understanding that the grasping at the I in phenomena as being truly established is the origin of our suffering. We recognize that by grasping at the I as being truly established, by grasping at phenomena as being truly established, by grasping at these things, the self-cherishing attitude starts. And by grasping at the self, we have an inappropriate attention that turns into then the afflictions that then gives rise to contaminated karmas, then that gives rise to cyclic existence. So we must get rid of the ignorance that grasp at the I as being truly established, and we find that the solution, the antidote to that ignorance is the wisdom realizing emptiness that we find presented in the Heart Sutra, and it's that final view of the Madhyamika Prasangika school, the middle way consequence school, which is the only view that will allow us to achieve fearlessness and complete bliss. So we recognize the importance of this Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge, because it's at this second turning of the wheel of Dharma where the Buddha showed us truly how to undo our ignorance in the most final way. And it was this Heart Sutra that showed the hearers, solitary realizers, how to achieve nirvana, and the bodhisattvas how to achieve Buddhahood, by combining their own individual kind of motivations with that wisdom, but the wisdom would be exactly the same that would be necessary. So recognize that this wisdom is such a treasure, such a beautiful thing, and it's the only antidote to all of our suffering. So we think about the only antidote to all of our suffering is this wisdom realizing emptiness, and we recognize that we must combine it with renunciation and bodhicitta in order to become Buddhas. If we only combine it with renunciation, we will only achieve an abiding nirvana. But if we combine it with renunciation and bodhicitta and emptiness, then we'll be able to achieve the complete state of Buddhahood. So it's this that we must do in order to remove the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience. There's no other way. The only way that we can do that is by understanding the meaning of this Heart Sutra implicitly and explicitly, and traversing the paths that are implicitly taught. Papa Sheraji Bharati Shimba Nyingpo Shoso Jagagedo Bhagavati Brajaparamita Brandeya Bhugedo Jamdende Ma Sheraji Bharati Shimbi. Let me try that again. I was reading it in the English and in the Tibetan at the same time. That's not going to work very well. Papa Shiraji Bharati Shimbi Nyingpo Shoso Jagagedo Bhagavati Brajaparamita Randeya Bhugedo Jamdende Ma Shiraji Bharati Shimbi Nyingpo Bumbo Jiko Digi Dagi Dupa Jodina Jamdende Jabika Bombi Rega Lungi Gendon Jambo Nanjanji Sembi Gendon Jambo Nandaji Dushude Tietze Jamdende Samo Nawan Shejao Juji Nandanji Dingenzi La Nyomba Shoso Nyamba Shoso Yandi Ze Janji Sema Sema Jambo Baba Janrezi Wanshu Shiraji Bharati Shimba Samo Jubanila Namba Danji Bumbo Ngabo Deda Lanjin Ranjinje Doma Nabo Dao Dene Zanji Jitu Zedan Demba Sharibu Shanju Semba Semba Jembo Baba Janrezi Wanshu La Di Gechi Mezo Rijibon Galala Shiraji Bharati Shimba Samo Juba Jeba Duba De Laba Jade Gechi Me Badan Shanju Semba Semba Jembo Baba Janrezi Wanshu Gitsidan Demba Sharada Di Bula De Gechi Mezo Sharibu Rijibon Galala Shiraji Bharati Shimba Samo Juba Jeba Duba De Da Naba Jaba Jade Bumbo Ngabo De Da Jaranjin Je Doma Naba Yandaba Jesu Dao Zu Dombo Domini Zuzo Domini Zule Domini Jemayeno Domini Lejan Zu Jemayeno Dejan Duzon Wadan Dushe Dan Namba Jeba Dan Bao Sharibu De Da Judam Je Domini De Zeni Meba Majeba Magaba Jema Meba Jema Janjo Adrao Meba Gawa Meba Jarebu de Dowena Domini Lazume Zome Dujime Nabajime Mime Name Jeme Lume Ime Zume Drame Jume Rome Rejame Chume Do Migame Bene Iji Kame Iji Nabajibe Bada Yame Do Mariba Ziba Me Gashi Sebi Bada Yame Do Dejan Dunya Wadan Gojo Wandom Gobodan La Me Yashime Doba Me Madoba Yame Do Jaribu de Dowena Janju Semba Nando Bame Bija Shiriji Baradi Shembala Denchi Nede Semla Jiba Majin Draba Medu Shinjilo Shinjila Deni Yanile Debi Darjinto Dusuntu Nam Baju Be Sanje Tanche Jang Shiriji Baradi Shembala Dene Lana Mebe Yandaba Zobi Janju Duba Ngomba Zoba Zanje Zo De Dowena Shiriji Baradi Shiminga Riba Shiminga Lana Mebenga When Yamada Yaminga Dunya Rabju Sheva Shiminga When Sambana Dema Sheba Shade Shiriji Baradi Shiminga Mebade Ata On Gate Paragate Parasangati Buddhizo Ha Sharibu Janju Zemba Jembo Deta Shiriji Baradi Shimba Samola Labaja O Dene Jon Dene Di Tinganzile De Shende Janju Zemba Jembo Baba Janrezi Wanshu La Lezo Jejo Wajine Lezo Rijibon de Dajano Rijibon de Dajane Dudi Jento Shinto Shiriji Baradi Shimba Zama Yeba Jade Dejin Shiba Nanjan Jesu Yerang O Jon Dene De Getsi Gatsi Netsi Randamba Sharada Di Budan Janju Zemba Jembo Baba Janrezi Wanshu Dan Tamche Dan Deme Dibi Gode Dada Lada Midan Lama Yidan Driza Jibi Jitenji Jomden Dele Sumbala Nyomba Do Gala Jube Nejo Damba Nengushe Duchu Ngai Dudo Jendru Babo Lama Yibu Shinzi Nezon Gandrozo La Shazelo Aga Samara Jashandara Samara Be Aga Samara Jashandara Aga samara jasandra samara me te ata on gate gate baragati barasangati buddhizo ababogonji zonji gai demidoji she lobodoji mebodoji shewadoji Dragi bachi metum beshi tanchi shetin gorye zo age rendon jaji jushi wada midon nube jandan wada tumba jonjin bon son son joji taji de jandan da de le jo. Now I'll make a mandala offering as a request for teaching. And this is offering a most beautiful, perfect universe to the teacher and the lineage all the way back to the Buddha that made this event possible. So we'll make a mandala offering. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sanje Jadan Zoji Jonan La, Janju Badu Dani Jazuji, Dagi Jin Zoji Bezonanji, Drola Benja Sanje Juba Jo. Sanje Jadan Zoji Jonan La, Janju Badu Dani Jazuji, Dagi Jin Zoji Bezonanji, Drola Benja Sanje Juba Jo. Sanje Jadan Zoji Jonan La, Janju Badu Dani Jazuji, Dagi Jin Zoji Bezonanji, Drola Benja Sanje Juba Jo. The one who is transformed into the reliable guide, motivated by altruism to benefit sentient beings, the teacher, Sugata, and protector, to you, I make prostrations. Enthused by great compassion, you taught the immaculate Dharma to dispel all perverted views. To you, the Buddha Gautama, I pay homage. Enthused by great compassion, you taught the immaculate Dharma to dispel all perverted views. To you, the Buddha Gautama, I pay homage. Enthused by great compassion, you taught the immaculate Dharma to dispel all perverted views. To you, the Buddha Gautama, I pay homage. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here this evening and allowing me to talk to you about the Buddha Dharma. It's my favorite thing in the world to talk about, so you give me such joy. You give me an opportunity to have such joy, and it wouldn't be possible without participants, without people watching this teaching. So I hope that you're able to receive the amount of benefit that I'm receiving, because the amount of benefit that I receive from giving these teachings and from being able to talk about the teachings that Khenso Geshe Wandak was so generous with and so freely gave to all of us is a true gift. So I just want to say thank you, and I hope that this is helpful for you and in your life and lives. So tonight, I want to talk about a simple quote from the Vinaya that then I heard very skillfully, just on a side kind of explained by Venerable Geshe Dorje Damdu, just this one stanza, and then I thought it would be interesting to show how we could mash it together with one of Lama Tsongkhapa's works. So we're not going to go into like great details about it, but I'm going to show you how it would work and how profound Lord Buddha's teachings are, and how you can unravel one stanza and turn it into the Lam Rim Chemo. I'm going to make this attempt this evening to kind of put these dots together for all of you. And we'll go from there. We'll see where this teaching goes from here, because we ran out of teaching last time. We finished the bodhicitta teaching. We finished Panchen Sonandrapa's general meaning of perfection. We finished it by reading Shantideva's first chapter of the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life in such a beautiful, beautiful way. And I thought it would be interesting to start to see why it's so important to really, really study and to understand what the Buddha taught. So that's what I'm going to try to attempt to do this evening and share with you. So in the Vinaya Sutra, or in the Vinaya teachings, we find a quote that is very, very commonly read and heard. And it says, 4 lines, do not commit any non-virtuous action. 1 line. Perform only perfect virtuous actions. 2nd line. 3rd line. Subdue your mind thoroughly. And then final line, this is the teaching of the Buddha. So, okay, so we have the Kangjur, we have it, the Chenrezig Tibetan Buddhist Center. There's 100 volumes there of the Buddha's teachings, hundreds of sutras, hundreds of tantras. I don't have my numbers of each down. I was trying to, it's pretty complicated in looking at that. So tons of sutras, tons of tantras, 100 volumes that each contain, it's not just one volume is a sutra or something like that. There's many, many, many works contained within each of those 100 volumes. So you can imagine, there's so many topics that are covered, and all of the 3 baskets are covered, and we find, everything that you can imagine, from the Here is Solitary Realizer, the Mahayana vehicle, the Perfection vehicle, as well as the resultant Tantric vehicle. We find all of those teachings in the Kangjur, the pronouncements of Lord Buddha, and then those authentic Indian commentaries that we have on those shelves, the 213 volumes with thousands of works, are all meant to explain that stanza. All of it. That big bookcase at the center is required to understand this one stanza. So why is that? We're going to rough it out a little bit here. I'm going to draw some lines around some things and start to show you how if you study properly, if you study like a master like Geshe Dorji Damdu, who had great masters teaching him, then you can start to extrapolate what these things mean by looking at one stanza and showing the entire path in it. And Rinpoche was so good at that, how he would take Atisha's, that understand there are persons of 3 capacities, small, medium, and great. I shall write clearly to distinguish their characteristics. And how Rinpoche would give an entire teaching on what that right there meant, and how that related to the entire path that Buddha ever taught. All the entire path he could show within that one stanza. So here, we're going to reverse it. We're going to show how, that was Atisha's text that then Lama Tsongkhapa wrote the Lam Rims on, as commentaries. And then ultimately, the mother being the main text, as it says in the beginning of the Lam Rim Chemo, that, in a kind of greater level, the Abhisama Lamkara is what's being referred to here. So we're gonna take it the other way. We're gonna go the Buddha said, and then we're gonna bring it into Lama Tsongkhapa's 3 principal paths. Does that sound fair? I think that sounds good. Okay, so do not commit any non-virtuous actions. So what could that relate to? If we want to be free from suffering, we have to abandon the causes of suffering. Correct? We learn that in the 1st and 2nd Noble Truth. We learn about all these different types of suffering, the 8 sufferings, 6 sufferings, 3 sufferings, and we learn that really it's that pervasive compounded suffering, that moment by moment moving towards more and more suffering and being thrust into various states of existence without having a control over, because of these karma seeds and afflictions giving rise to contaminated existence, giving rise to suffering. So we see here, do not commit any non-virtuous action. So we can relate that to the principal path. When we look at the three principal paths in Lama Tsongkhapa's text, we see that they are renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view. So the correct view of the nature of reality, when we look at what that correct view is. We can look at the three lines here and relate them to those. So renunciation is a desire to get out of suffering, to get out of cyclic existence. What are you renouncing? You're renouncing suffering, you're renouncing unhappiness. So how do you get out of suffering? You remove the cause of suffering. So if you stop, engaging in non-virtuous actions, then this is what gives rise to suffering. So here you can see renunciation is being presented by Buddha by saying, do not commit any non-virtuous actions. Renounce suffering. You want to definitely emerge from suffering, you have to get rid of its causes. So you can see renunciation being presented there. Perform only perfect virtuous actions. What are the highest virtues? We just learned that the bodhicitta is the gold-making elixir that turns this ordinary body into a body of a Buddha. It turns all of our, in Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, it says that. We just learned that. And we know that anything that we do, once we have this beautiful mind, Shantideva says, becomes virtuous activities, even when we're distracted. So the most perfect kind of mind would be this bodhicitta, would be this mind that gets us to the highest amount of happiness, the highest amount of bliss. And that's Buddhahood. And we know the only entrance into the Mahayana is bodhicitta, and the Mahayana is the only vehicle that brings us to Buddhahood. So we see that the most excellent type of virtue that we can engage in is the virtues that the bodhisattvas engage in, and that the virtues that those with this mind that wishes for others to have happiness, and the causes of happiness, and be free from suffering, and the causes of suffering more than yourself. This beautiful mind is the perfect kind of virtuous mind. So just roughly presented, not going into some details, looking at it just like that. Just think about it, right? Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, right? Well, non-virtue gives rise to suffering. When you renounce, what are you renouncing? You're renouncing suffering. You want to get out of the suffering of cyclic existence. The three types of suffering: the suffering of change, suffering of suffering, and the pervasive compounded suffering. You want to get out of those things. Those things are caused by non-virtue. We look at that non-virtue gives rise to suffering. Now, of course, we look and we find that what gives rise to the non-virtue, we find it's the grasping at the eye as being truly established, right? So that then leads us to the next point that Buddha makes: subdue your mind thoroughly. So we know that renunciation and bodhicitta won't make us a Buddha. Those are great motivations. One is to definitely get out of cyclic existence. One is to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. But those are just motivations. Without the wisdom realizing emptiness, you can't cut the root of cyclic existence. It's not possible. So we have to, if we want to achieve an abiding nirvana, we have to have renunciation combined with a wisdom to cut the root of cyclic existence. If we want to achieve Buddhahood, we have to have bodhicitta. We first have to have renunciation that then gives rise to this desire to emerge, which is a desire to emerge from cyclic existence for yourself. And then you start to see how incomplete it is if you think of it along those lines, because if you achieve the state of a hero or a solitary realizer's nirvana, you haven't fulfilled all of your needs or all sentient beings' needs, because you still have, even if you're in a hero or solitary realizer's state of an abiding nirvana and you've gotten rid of the afflictive obstructions, you still have obstructions to omniscience and you can't be a Buddha. The only way you can become a Buddha is to get rid of the obstructions to omniscience. The only way you can get rid of the obstructions to omniscience is to combine that same wisdom that the hero and solitary realizer knew about the nature of reality with not only this renunciation, but a renunciation that then gave rise to bodhicitta, a real bodhicitta that wishes to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. And then we learned How does that bodhicitta come about? We learned that there were those two ways, the equalizing and exchanging self with others practice, sent down from the profound view lineage, and the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment from the exchanging, from the extensive deeds lineage. So we learned how you would get that kind of mind and how that would come about. And then when you have that kind of mind, and that mind comes about, and you generate that first moment of the mind that aspires to enlightenment, you are bodhisattva. You're a bodhisattva at that time, and you're in the state of being. You're a type of being that's creating the best kind of virtue all the time, because it's the kind of virtue that makes you a Buddha. Because the only vehicle that gets you to Buddhahood is the Mahayana, right? We can say that others get you to the Mahayana if we want to be technical, or that you could, start there and go to the Mahayana. But without the Mahayana, Buddhahood isn't possible. You enter the Mahayana, you become a bodhisattva, you become the best virtue maker, because your kind of virtue is the virtue that even if you're sleeping or distracted or going to the bathroom, you're going towards Buddhahood. Everything you're doing is virtue to go towards Buddhahood. So you combine that kind of virtue, right, with the wisdom realizing emptiness that subdues both the here solitary realizers and the mind of the bodhisattva. But this special mind that puts others' needs before their own, that cherishes others more than oneself, when combined with emptiness, has a much greater power to destroy the subtle afflictions. So the bodhisattvas on the 8th bodhisattva level have already destroyed the same amount of afflictions that a solitary realizer has destroyed, sitting in an abiding nirvana. Yet he or she is driven by their love and compassion not to give up there and just stay in some sort of peace, because he or she knows that they'll have to cross a river twice if they decide to do that. They'll have to go back and then go the bodhisattva path all the way. So that being knows that compassion holds them from going to that abiding nirvana and pushes them forth through the 8th, 9th, and 10th bodhisattva grounds to purify the obstructions to omniscience to become a Buddha. But that the subdue your mind part is necessary. So how does one subdue one's mind? So why do we have two types of meditation? We have analytical meditation and we have fixed meditation. Why do we have these two types? Well, the real point isn't to just calm down and have a great day. It's to cut the root of cyclic existence, to subdue our minds. So we take analytical meditation and we get really, really good, and we turn the light of wisdom on really bright. We get to the point where we are so sharp. We can understand the nature of reality, just like we're playing ping pong back and forth, effortlessly. Effortlessly. We know the nature of reality intellectually. But our mind at that point isn't calm enough to see emptiness. No matter how smart it is, it's doing this. Even though how smart it is, it's not able to focus enough on what the point of its analysis is to see emptiness directly. So it requires steadiness that the fixed meditation brings forth. So you're starting to bring these, so you're doing these two separately initially. The Dalai Lama was just talking about this. I encourage you all, please watch His Holiness's teachings. They're on all the time now. If you're not, I have no idea why. We have a live bodhisattva. We have the Buddha of compassion in our world talking to us through the computer, live. Really, I have no idea why we wouldn't be looking at them at least later on the next day or something. I don't know why. How many sentient beings can watch the Buddha of compassion talk? And I'm finding that some of the most amazing lessons are being found woven into some of these conferences, where he seems like he's not even paying attention, and then he turns into this laser because he's gathered all of the information properly, without bias, without distraction, and he knows exactly how to make everything make sense to everyone listening. Because there isn't this bias that this mind we were learning about today at the Tibet House, this mind we see everything, but then our mind turns into what's called an eliminative engager, and it eliminates all this stuff. And then we create this image that we think is the reality we're looking at. But it's very, very limited in terms of what we're seeing to be true and perceiving to be true, because we're so distracted all of the time. But somebody like His Holiness doesn't need to just, bleh. His Holiness can look and not be, really, really, we look at it in two ways. His Holiness, we look at it as the Buddha of compassion, and of course the Buddha can do all of these things. But the Buddha shows us, right, an example of what he or she did when they emanate to be able to become Buddhas. So we can look at it any way we want. But the reason that His Holiness, one way or another, was able to really give the right advice at the right time is because he doesn't have himself in the way. He cherishes others more than himself, so he's always trying to figure out what will be the best thing for everyone, not about him. It's amazing to watch, and I just encourage all of you we saw Khenser Geshe Wandak, we were around Khenser Geshe Wandak. Khenser Geshe Wandak was a true bodhisattva, truly understood emptiness, truly understood highest yoga tantra, a greatly secretive, highest yoga tantra yogi that I can't even believe was anywhere near someone like me. But I just hope that someone like me realizes that that's just who I will become. I can't get caught up in this. I'm not good enough, and my mind is too impure. I won't be able to be as good as Khenser Geshe Wandak. We have to have more courage than that. The Buddha tells us we have to. The Buddha said we all have Buddha nature. The Buddha said you have exactly the same mind I had. Let me tell you what to do. We have to have courage because the Buddha is telling us what to do. The Buddha has told us what to do in the pronouncements of Lord Buddha. And then these incredibly holy beings, some of them we call second Buddhas, right? Sometimes they say Nagarjuna second Buddha, sometimes they say Vasubandhu second Buddha. Everybody says second Buddha about so many different beings. But that's because of the greatness of these beings that are telling us exactly what to do. So we shouldn't be discouraged or feel like His Holiness said demoralized. Geshe Dorje Damdu says this all the time. If I'm going 1,000,000 miles an hour and you're not getting this, just hang in there, right? Don't feel demoralized. You're getting it. You're getting it. You're moving towards something, right? You're getting there. Don't feel that because if you're not getting this subtle detail, I assure you, no one in the room's getting all the subtle details. He's like teaching at 17 levels at one time, right? So recognize that and start where you are at right now and know you will be Buddha. You're not Buddha, sorry. That's a big rumor going around, which is really easy to untangle with a couple logical points. But you have Buddha nature, which means you have the ingredient that's necessary. You have a clear light mind. You have this thing within you. You have a treasure. You're so poor right now, right? You're living in a house and don't know where your next meal is going to come from. But underneath the floor is a treasure chest full of billions of dollars. And we just have to realize we have to, dig it up. That's, I think it's Maitreya that says it's this treasure chest or Asanga under the floor of our house we don't know is there. And we feel so poor. We shouldn't feel so poor. We have this treasure chest that we can turn into the most rich mind in the world, the mind of a Buddha. We have this mental consciousness that can be transformed, proliferated, matured into the state of the Buddha's mind. And our mind has the same nature right now as the Buddha's mind in terms of the lack of true establishment. The nature of our mind is empty of true establishment, therefore it can give rise to Buddha mind. If our mind had some inherent existence, it couldn't give rise to Buddha. Right? So, this is the teaching of the Buddha. So then the Buddha can we can all go home? That's it. No. So let's see what Lama Tsongkhapa says about do not commit any non-virtuous actions. All right, so of course we have the introduction, the promise to compose, so let's read the three principal paths. I'm not going to give a commentary this evening. I just got tempted to go through the outline of the commentary on the three principal paths, but we'll do that another time. But let's just look at this in relation to this one stanza. The three principal aspects of the path by Lama Tsongkhapa. I bow down to the venerable lamas. As well as I am able, I will explain the essence of all the teachings of the Buddha, the path praised by the conqueror's children, the entrance for those who desire liberation. Sorry, I can't help myself. So this first stanza is interpreted in two different ways. But either way you look at it, it's talking about renunciation, bodhicitta, and emptiness. And so it says, as well as I am able, I will explain. So some lamas say the essence of the teachings of the Buddha is referring to renunciation. The path praised by the conqueror's children is referring to bodhicitta. And the entrance for those who desire liberation is speaking of the correct view of emptiness. So some scholars say that, and then some scholars say that all three lines are referring to all three. The essence of of all the teachings of the Buddha are renunciation, bodhicitta, and emptiness. The path praised by the conqueror's children is renunciation, bodhicitta, and emptiness. The entrance for those who desire liberation is renunciation, and bodhicitta, and emptiness. So now we put Lama Tsongkhapa's stanza up against Buddha's stanza, right? Just one stanza here, and then Lama Tsongkhapa is going to go on to explain. Buddha probably did too, right? But now we're going to see, what does Lama Tsongkhapa have to say if he's not just abbreviating things like Lord Buddha did. Listen with clear mind, you fortunate ones, who are not attached to the joys of cyclic existence. Strive to make good use of leisure and opportunity and direct your minds to the path that pleases the Buddhas. Without pure renunciation, an end to attraction for the pleasures of cyclic existence is unattainable. The craving for existence also binds beings. Thus, from the outset, seek renunciation. Reverse attraction to this life by reflecting on how leisure and opportunity are difficult to find and how life is ephemeral and without span. Reverse attraction to future lives by repeatedly thinking of the infallibility of karma and its effects and the miseries of samsara. Do not commit any non-virtuous action, says Buddha in the Vinaya Sutra. Here it's saying repeatedly thinking of the infallibility of karma and its effects and the miseries of samsara. Right? What are karma and its effects? Non-virtue gives rise to suffering. Contemplating thus, when for an instant, so here we now have the definition of renunciation that many great scholars agree is the definition of renunciation. Contemplating thus, for an instant, you do not admire the splendors of cyclic existence and remain intent on liberation day and night, renunciation is born in you then. So if day and night you have this mind that wants to emerge from cyclic existence, this is the sign that you have renunciation. If you're not doing this, then you still, let's go back now to the other thing that I was supposed to read before the teaching, but I didn't, but that's okay. Let's look at the two lines of the instructions on parting from the four attachments that pertain to this. If you are attached to this life, you are not a spiritual practitioner. If you are attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. So, if contemplating thus, when for an instant you do not admire the splendors of cyclic existence, here it says, if you are attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. Lama Tsongkhapa says, so that's from Manjushri to the great Sakya Pandit. Now this is Lama Tsongkhapa saying, notice everybody's saying the same thing. And if you're saying the same thing, then it's okay. It's concordant. And that's why we analyze these things, to find out if they're concordant or not. Or if this is just hogwash. We should move on. Are we analyzing this? Are we using critical analysis? So then, Manjushri says to the great Sakya Lama, if you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you're attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. What does that mean? Contemplating this, what we just said, reverse attraction to this life. If you're attached to this life, you are not a spiritual practitioner. Reverse attraction to this life. By reflecting on how leisure and opportunity are difficult to find and how life is ephemeral and without span, reverse attraction to future lives. By repeatedly thinking of the infallibility of karma and its effects and the miseries of samsara, contemplating thus, for an instant, you do not admire the splendors of cyclic existence, you are not attached to samsara, and remain intent on liberation day and night, you have no break in that, renunciation is born in you then. Amazing, right? Amazing how we can extrapolate this. So then what does Lama Tsongkhapa say? Well, the Buddha says that we have to engage in as much perfect virtue, perform only perfect virtuous actions. So why is that? Well, then Lama Tsongkhapa says, renunciation, if not tempered by a pure mind of bodhicitta, however, will not bring forth the perfect bliss of unsurpassed enlightenment. Therefore, the wise ones generate the excellent mind of bodhicitta. So what are we thinking about? How does this bodhicitta come about? We have to have this firm foundation of renunciation. When we go through that meditation we sometimes do before the motivation meditation before class, and we go through the four noble truths, we're trying to generate in our mind the thing that will allow us to empathize and then develop love and compassion, empathize with and then develop love and compassion for all sentient beings. It won't work unless we do that. So I'm hoping we can familiarize our minds with something that works, not with things that don't work. So I that's why I'm so focused on these points of the Four Noble Truths and the first and second turning of the wheel of Dharma and so forth, third turning of the wheel of Dharma too. But when we do the meditations, really focusing on that. And when we talk about Buddha nature, we find that in the third turning of the wheel of Dharma. So we really talk about all of these points, and it's so important. And why is it so important? Because we want to become Buddhas. We want to do what it takes to become Buddhas. If we're going to do something, thinking we're heading there, right? Well, why waste our time? So let's do it in the order that it will need to be in order for it to work. And I assure you, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that it works. I don't have, renunciation, bodhicitta, and I haven't seen emptiness. But I have sugarcane forms of these things, right? That are correctly assuming about them. I'm correct about them. And it's just a little bit more analysis and a little bit of a calmer mind. And I know that in this lifetime I could become a bodhisattva and see emptiness. I really believe this to be possible. I believe that in this lifetime I could reach the first bodhisattva ground. And that's not arrogance. That's because I have flawless instructions to do so. And I have a desire for it to happen. I want to get renunciation. Therefore, I do what it will take to get renunciation. I want to get bodhicitta. So I do what it will take to get bodhicitta. I want to get the correct view of emptiness. So I do what it will take to get the correct view of emptiness. And that requires an enormous amount of study and an enormous amount of analysis and getting up and sitting and trying to focus on one thing and then fighting off all the other things that are coming in and doing it every day and trying to get to that one thing, that one thing, that one thing over and over again and trying to get to that one thing for longer and trying to get to that one thing clearer. All for the reason so that my mind will be calm enough when I understand this all well enough for me to see emptiness, and I'll be hopefully a bodhisattva then, which will mean I'll be on the path of accumulation. I'm sorry, wrong statement. I'll be a bodhisattva then, which will mean I'll be on the first bodhisattva ground. Incredible, and I have all the instructions to do it without not impartial, not partial instructions. All the instructions to do it are here. I mean, I think you're hearing it, right? I hope you're hearing it. If you're not hearing it, like adjust something, adjust your speaker, right? Because it's so clear. If you're interested in getting clarity around this stuff, and I'm not saying there's no law anyone needs to get clarity around this stuff, but if you want to have, what does it say? Bliss, perfect bliss. That enlightenment is, you don't get it unless you do this stuff. Lama Tsongkhapa says right here, and he's not, Lama Tsongkhapa hasn't really steered any of us wrong. Look at Khenser Geshe Wandak's realizations and understand that Lama Tsongkhapa and the views Lama Tsongkhapa presented were those views that Rinpoche held and made him that bodhisattva being that understood emptiness so well. So if you liked what you saw in terms of the way that a being could be, then you're going to have to get renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness. And how will you get bodhicitta? Swept up in the current of the four powerful rivers, tied by the strong bonds of karma, so hard to undo, caught in the iron net of self-grasping, completely enveloped by the darkness of ignorance, born and reborn in boundless cyclic existence, ceaselessly tormented by the three miseries, thinking of your mothers in this condition. Generate the supreme mind of bodhicitta. Okay, so now we've finished perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind thoroughly. So how do you cut the root? How do you subdue your mind thoroughly? So first of all, it has to be calm enough to look at what subdues it thoroughly. So it has to be thoroughly calmed and thoroughly wise to be able to cut the root of cyclic existence. So what would you look at? If your mind was thoroughly calm, what would it be calm enough to look at? So let's see what Lama Tsongkhapa says subdues your mind thoroughly. What would you look at? Although you train in renunciation and the mind of bodhicitta, without wisdom that realizes the ultimate reality, you cannot cut the root of cyclic existence. Therefore, strive to understand dependent arising. And we know that emptiness is dependent arising. Dependent arising is the middle way. Emptiness is depending arising. Emptiness is the middle way. It's said in another way. So if I said that incorrectly, I think you get the point though, right? So that the middle way is dependent arising. Emptiness is dependent arising. Therefore, emptiness is the middle way. What is the thing that will cut the root of cyclic existence? It's this wisdom realizing emptiness. What is that wisdom realizing? What is emptiness? What do objects lack or not lack? What is Lama Tsongkhapa talking about? Here we're going to start to talk about how we dismantle this grasping at the I and phenomena as being truly established. Dismantle this idea that things have some objective existence. Even conventionally, we find out that things only have a subjective conventional existence, and that ultimately they are empty of all true existence. So let's see what Lama Tsongkhapa says that subdues our mind. If it says in the Sakya Lama's text that he wrote after he heard Orange Manjushri say it to him, it says, if you have grasping, you don't have the view here. So what is the view they're talking about? If there is grasping, you don't have the view. What is this view? It's the correct view. The correct view. It's that third principal path. The correct view of the nature of reality. It's this thing that will subdue your mind. And the only thing it says there, you can't cut the root of cyclic existence with bodhicitta and renunciation alone. You have to have this wisdom realizing emptiness. So we see here it will start to talk about what is that wisdom realizing emptiness. One who sees the infallible cause and effect of all phenomena in samsara and nirvana and destroys all focuses of apprehension has entered the path which pleases the Buddhas. Appearances are infallible, dependent arising. Emptiness is the understanding that is free of assertions. As long as these two are seen as distinct, you have not yet realized the intent of the Buddha. When these two realizations are concurrent, where the mere sight of infallible dependent origination concurrently destroys all modes of grasping through definite discernment, at that time the analysis of the profound view is perfected. So this is the perfection of it. Furthermore, appearances refute the extremes of existence. Emptiness refutes the extreme of non-existence. When you understand that emptiness arises in the form of cause and effect, you're not captivated by the view of the extremes. O my child, once you have thus realized the points of three principal paths, seek solitude and cultivate strong determination and quickly reach the final aspired goal, the final aspired goal. Amazing, beautiful, incredible. I can't even believe it when we look at these things. When we look at how deep this idea that things are not risen from self, not arisen from other, not a combination of both, not arisen causelessly, right? Can we find a self, right? When we start to say, is the eye my head? Is the eye, my hand? Rinpoche used to always say that and start doing it. Is the eye my skin? Is it my blood under there? Is it my bones? Is it my, you start to say, is this me? Is it, my consciousness me? And then you start to get to this place where you can't find this. And then because there's no inherently existent I, but dependent origination, there certainly is. And there's an I that isn't singular because it's not findable, because you realize that in order for me to think of myself as Jeff, I have this kind of apprehension of my aggregates and I relate to my parts and my consciousness, and I put all these parts together and I kind of then am able to label them and bring them into being through this label as Jeff. So there isn't any kind of singular findable Jeff that can arise by itself. And then if we look at, maybe it arises from other, we'd have to say then, we just said that there were all these aggregates that I'm relating to, right? To come up with Jeff. I'm trying to not make it so complicated. All of these aggregates that I'm relating to come up with Jeff. And my hand, my head, my eyes, my ear, my tongue, I start to count. I can come up with thousands and thousands of parts, in the Jeff in the moment, and the moment's going by, and thousands of, different Jeffs. If I think that Jeff is arisen from other, because this thing that Jeff is labeled on is so many different parts. And we can't say that the mind is Jeff because Jeff's a boy. Mine's not boy or girl. Mine's just mine. Mind and mental factors, right? If we say that mind has beginningless nature and has endless mind. So when I die, we know that I can be reborn as dog, cat, boy, girl. Mind isn't boy or girl. So we have all these different parts. If we say that the parts are me, then there's like thousands of Jeffs sitting here talking to you. And we've already negated the one, and we negated the both. So you can't like mash them together and then make it work out somehow, because neither one work out. It collapses in on itself. When you say, like the Jain tradition somehow says it's arisen a little from both. self and other. Look into it. I'm not going to go into the negation of tenets tonight, but that's an assertion. All schools below Madhyamika Prasangika say it arises from other. All the Samkhya school, the enumerators say it arises from self, and other schools. So it's not like this idea is like so silly. The Svatantrika Madhyamika has this arisen from other a little bit. So it's very profound what we're trying to find. And then it's not causeless. We see there's all these things. It's not that it's not randomly happening. We find temporal sequence. We find cause and effect. We find all of these things that are required for us to then label Jeff as Jeff. So it's not causeless, and that negates the nihilist view. People think emptiness means there's nothing exists. It's all over. I see it on TikTok all the time. We're on TikTok right now. I see it all the time. It's not what the Buddha taught. The Buddha didn't teach that there was no self. The Buddha taught there was no inherently existent self. The Buddha has a self. The Buddha is a person, can be a person, right? When we look at an emanation, we look at Buddha Shakyamuni. Buddha Shakyamuni was a person, a person that is imputed on aggregates, right? When we look at Buddha Shakyamuni, the being that was walking around 2,600 years ago, the Buddha who had realized Buddhahood was walking around, but there was a self, there was a person there that was talking. Not an inherently existent person, but a person, a self. So Buddhism isn't saying that we don't exist. We're just saying that we don't exist arisen from ourselves, arisen from other. We don't abide in the way that we normally cling to ourselves abiding. And it's, we're not going to figure out exactly what that, fine detail is to get to tonight in this teaching. Because yes, we can read Lama Tsongkhapa's profound explanation of ultimate truth, but it's going to take our analyzing it over and over and over again and looking at it. Okay, how am I perceiving this object? How am I perceiving my mind? My mind is empty too. What's seeing the emptiness of my mind? What's seeing the emptiness of the object? Is the object and my mind empty? That's when that separates the emptiness from the you don't know emptiness. You think you have a real good grasp on this? Start doing a little Mahamudra meditation and don't end up where Sakya Pandita said, in a dull state that gives rise to an animal rebirth. That's either a nihilistic or grasping at some substantialism that's just dull, super dull. You're in this kind of clear mind, you think, and you're just in bliss, spaced out. You're not spaced out. You're clear like a laser that's so calm and focused, and you can directly perceive without any conceptual need the nature of reality with a yogic direct perceiver. So it takes grinding out day after day this misperception, because we're not only apprehending it wrong, it's appearing wrong. So the appearance that we're seeing itself, because of our obstructions to omniscience, is wrong. Where everything's appearing in a way. Even an Arya who sees emptiness, as soon as they're done seeing emptiness, things appear wrong. They know better, but they appear wrong. So we're trying to fight a very tough battle here that can be won, because Buddha won it. But if we think we're going to fight the battle we want to fight the battle, and we don't need to do this, we're not going to study, we're better than that, and Milarepa, I love that. Go right to Milarepa, who's like a totally advanced practitioner, bodhisattva, who has some obstacles, right, in the way, and then meets a perfect teacher and gets perfect instructions, and is this very, very rare being that, we've heard about a couple of. And then we want to say, well, we're going to just be like that. We don't need to study, Milarepa didn't, We don't even know what Milarepa did. He was getting secret teachings from Dakinis and teachings from Marpa, and Marpa's wife was giving him instructions. I mean, there was a lot of stuff going on there. A lot of appearances that appeared ordinary were not ordinary. If you read the songs of Milarepa. So think you can just do what Milarepa did. But I don't know. Read the songs of Milarepa and see if you think you like Milarepa or not. I'm certainly not. I'm certainly going to need to like smash this ignorance in my mind over and over and over again. And then I'll get to a point where I have some kind of nangjel, some pride that's still grasping at the eye and thinking that I'm grasping at this idea that I have the correct view. Right? And I haven't even untangled that much because of all of my conceptual entanglements and all of my ego that gets fixed into my learning. I can think I know something so well, and then the whole house falls down when somebody really presents it in a difficult, detailed way and says, well, what about this, Jeff? Well, what about that? Be challenged in your life. Don't be satisfied with not being challenged. If you're not challenged, we all know in sports, you want to get better at something? I'm not even a sports person. I've heard this so many times. Play with somebody better. Don't play with someone who stinks. You're just going to think you're awesome. You know, get to the level. And if you think like, oh, well, you know, I would like to know what that person knows, get on the level and then find someone higher than that person. And then, you know, and then get to that realization and find whatever realization next person you need to find. Don't be satisfied, you know, until you've mastered the, you know, something, and then don't be satisfied with what you've mastered. Make sure there's not more. Lord Atisha, the great story. He thought he had mastered everything. And then these holy beings show him all of these things he hadn't learned before. And he's humbled. He had thought he had known everything there was to know, you know. And we're certainly not at the level Atisha was at that point. Rinpoche said, you know, if we haven't abandoned ignorance, we need to keep studying. You know, I heard teachings from the early 2000s, and Rinpoche said that I think it was Ensapa, the great Kadampa master, when he was passing, his students were all crying and said, what do we do now? You know, who will we go to? Who will answer these questions you've been so willing to answer at all times? Who will answer these questions? And the great Kadampa master merely looked up and said, the texts are your teacher. You know, we have to look at these books. We have to. And then eventually we can just look at our minds. I think Diglo Khyentse Rinpoche said, first the teacher was my teacher, then the texts were my teacher, and then my mind was my teacher. You think your mind's your teacher yet? Ask yourself that question. Look in the mirror of the Dharma. If you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you're attached to samsara, you don't have renunciation. If you're attached to your own self-interest, you don't have bodhicitta. If there's grasping, you don't have the view. Can you afford to just rely on your own mind and what you know? Do you know enough? That's what we all ask ourselves. So that's what I wanted to talk about tonight. And I made the decision like 10 minutes before the teaching that we were going to mash these two together. So luckily, because of Khenser Geshe Wandak's kindness, Geshe Lobsang Gombo's kindness, Geshe Aga's kindness, Geshe Matenzan Ladranla's kindness, right? Geshe Dorje Damdu's kindness, Demalocho Rinpoche's kindness, His Holiness the Dalai Lama's kindness. Because of all of the kindness of those beings, we were able to just do that. And I say we because you're here too. I wouldn't have just done this without participants. And we're going to do more like this because we can. Because we've had great teachers show us how to do this. So, I think it's so wonderful. And the last thing that I want to say is that you always hear the Dalai Lama say he talks to his friends who are Buddhists. They just rely on simple mantras or don't really get at the teachings. And he says they're like people who don't have teeth at all, or like something to put in like teeth. They can't enjoy very much diversity of food. Let's not be like that. Let's try to have the teeth to be able to really, really eat and enjoy the deliciousness of this nectar of the Dharma and all of it. and be able to then look at a sutra that people just chant and say, this is just profound, we can't understand what it means, and say, no, we'll be able to talk about this stanza for the next 6 months, no problem. That's what it's going to take to be able to become a Buddha, and nothing short of that. And what renunciation will mean when you're beginning, before you get it, and right before you get it, are going to be vastly different things. So if you think you're, starting to feel like you have renunciation, check yourself, because I've been there before, and there's a lot of deeper places to get to in terms of wishing to emerge before you actually are wishing to emerge. Your days, what I can say about this is that your days, he says day and night, you think of nothing but getting out of cyclic existence. There will be less and less time in your day where that isn't happening if you're doing this correctly. And then at some point in time, renunciation will happen. I believe that it'll happen to me because I've watched my days become brighter and brighter because of removing that desire, that attachment to this life and to samsara, little by little. I'm watching it leave. I'm watching hours in the day become more filled with the desire to emerge. So I'm hopeful. And if somebody like me can do this, then there's no excuses. We'll leave it at that. So thank you so much. Anybody have any questions? We have a few minutes. I don't even know if I think TikTok's still on, but I can't see the feed. Oh, there is a question there. Let's see. Hold on. Rather than literal magic, no, it is certainly not literal magic. It's we say it's magical, but it's not magic, because there's a very specific path with very specific cause and effect that lead up to one being able to first get renunciation, and then be able to generate bodhicitta, and then be able to, as a bodhisattva, get one's mind clearer and clearer, to be able to understand what reality is, and then be able to remove all conceptuality through meditation, to understand in a pure way what the 16 attributes of the Four Noble Truths are, and what the nature of reality is in terms of ultimate truth. So this is not something that's blind faith. This isn't something that just comes about through, like you just said on there, magic. It isn't, how it works at all. And we're not going to just be chopping wood one day and just suddenly realize enlightenment, unfortunately, unless we're very, very rare, special, usually doesn't happen kind of beings. Most of us are so just enmeshed in our own kind of biases and attachments and our hatreds and all the ignorance that makes all of that happen, that the undoing of that and the undoing of the innumerable amounts of conceptions and wrong conceptions that we have will take a wisdom that hits every one of those gophers. If you're playing that gopher game, hits every single one of them and doesn't leave one of them out. So it's going to take an immense amount of wisdom related in terms of antidote in order to achieve these realizations that we talk about. And it can literally, I watched in class today with Geshe Dorje Damdu at Tibet House, it can literally be proven through logic that one's mind can be taken to a state of perfection and omniscience. Not through magic, through a very specific pathway of removing certain things that our biases eliminate in terms of our perception of reality. We're able to see, even right now, the impermanence of phenomena. We're able to see this thing right now that is momentarily, every 65 times, every time I do this, is dying, is changing, is becoming older. And we could actually, this is something that we could actually come to the realization of. So anyway, so yes, no, not magic. I think I lost my train of thought a little bit, but that's it. Sorry, I meant in relation to Milarepa flying and such. Milarepa flying and such, yeah, no, those are definitely, we have to look at that, right? We weren't there, first of all, but when we read the text, we find that there become no hindrances to our ability to travel with our mind to other places if we achieve certain levels of clairvoyance. And that's not only in Buddhism. In the Hinduism, we say that that's something that's pretty easily achieved. I know that sounds kind of like crazy and maybe easily achieved back then when there was more merit in the world. But definitely there are states of clairvoyance. There's a clairvoyance where you can do, you can emanate, you could like go to Tibet right now, right? In your mind. You're not, your mind is able to go there. This is when we're talking about the different clairvoyant states where your mind could maybe go. Your eyes could see, super far. Your ears could hear all these things no one else could hear. You could get your meditation to the point where these things could happen. They haven't happened to me, but definitely more clarity around things have happened. So I see how more clear can happen with auditory or gustatory. I see how more clarity could happen. So why not, right? With the mind, you see that this clarity could happen where certain obstacles or hindrances you would normally think in mind were there could be removed. Then you can know former lives. We even see beings that are able to somewhat do that now. I don't know. We have to take it for what it is, and we have to study and see. Don't take it for blind faith. I've never done that. I debated Rinpoche up to the last few months of his life because I wanted to understand more. And then we'll be able to understand other people's minds eventually, like reading minds a little bit. Only the Buddha can truly understand the full mind. I talked with Geshe Aga about this, and I was like, if you could just get this talent, why don't you just get this talent, read the Buddha's mind, and then you know everything? And he said it didn't work like that. These are little clairvoyances. It's like you can see a house with your eyes, but you don't know what's inside. So, yeah, you can develop all these special things. So maybe, and definitely in the Tantrayana teachings, there's a mention of things like this. But usually we're talking about it in terms of the mental being, in terms of psychic abilities, clairvoyances. But then there's Swiftfoot. So yeah, you could maybe do other special things. But I don't know. I don't focus on the mystical or the magical. I focus on like what's in front of me. I'm not at a level where mystical and magical is going to do anything really for me. The rabbit's foot days are over for me, and I'm more into the cutting and rub it. The Buddha said, I can't wash away the sins with water. I can't remove the suffering with your hands. I can't give you my realizations. I can just teach you the truth, and then you can meditate on it, and then you can free yourself. The Buddha can't free you. We say that the Buddha can fulfill the needs of himself and all sentient beings, but that's because the Buddha can teach you exactly what you need to free yourself, and he's the only reliable being who can. The Buddha's not going to do any special blessing, or what is this new thing? Ascending masters and stuff that can just come in you and like teach you something and then you know more. If there were those things, the Buddha has ultimate compassion for all sentient beings. He would just drop into each and every one of us, and we could all go home to the bliss and freedom from suffering and have fearlessness. So we have to look at what's logical. We have to use our brains. We have this incredible intelligence that animals don't have. Don't act dumb like an animal. Use this mind that we're so blessed to have to analyze the things so that we can cut the root of cyclic existence ourselves. So yeah, that's it. Thank you so much. I have to, but yeah, Milarepa, great stories. But I actually, I have to say that I leaned out of that sort of thing. I love reading it now because I lived with a being that was such a tantric master. I see like Rinpoche was probably flying, right? And I can imagine it, and it's special to me. But that's just like kind of oozy-goozy, faithy, you know what I mean? Something that, you know, makes me smile. But the reason that I think that may be true is because of this real, secure, clear, critically analyzable information that I don't have to like think, oh, maybe people can fly, and I've never seen one. I can look at this and say, yeah, I've seen suffering. I've had the suffering of birth, aging, sickness, and death. I know what that is. I've separated from the pleasant and met with unpleasant. I don't always get what I want, and I have this thing that suffers, my mind that suffers, right? I can relate to that. That's true. The Buddha said that's true. Yeah, that's true. Anyway. So I like to look at things that I can make sense out of in my mind and change my mind with, and that really encourages me because we know that blind faith is controvertible. We know it can change. We want to arrive at incontrovertibility. We want it to not be able to change if it's true. And I don't want to like one day, because I haven't analyzed it enough, be like, oh, maybe Santa Claus is real. I'm going to go over here. Very, very dangerous until we get to inferential valid cognition, because we're still in a place of controverted. We can change. Our mind can change. If we don't have a correct sign in our mind, it's controvertible. It's not incontrovertible. And that's the beauty of once we get to inferential valid cognition and we get to inference through analysis in conception, we have incontrovertibility. So our view of emptiness won't change. Our view of these things that we want to hold so secure won't be able to just vanish because we're chasing off after something more fun. So thank you so much. So in closing, if we are attached to this life, we are not spiritual practitioners. If we are attached to samsara, we don't have renunciation. If we're attached to our own self-interest, we don't have bodhicitta. If there's grasping, we don't have the view. Okay. So now, in conclusion, we'll do a concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer as a thanksgiving for the teaching that was given from the teacher all the way back to Buddha Shakyamuni, the great, reliable guide who's so kind to us to get up after those 49 days of staying in meditation and going, I don't know if I should do this. This teaching's so profound, so vast. I don't know who can understand it. You know, knowing that I'm just here in the woods. I don't know what to do. And then, you know, some so kind being said, please Buddha teach, please Buddha teach. And then the Buddha started teaching to all beings' capacities. And we find all those teachings today. And if we didn't have Lord Atisha and Lama Tsongkhapa to be able to show us how all these teachings are contradictory, are not contradictory, and if we didn't have Atisha to show us that all of these things are instructions for you to practice. These aren't just great sayings, they're instructions for you to practice. And you can easily understand the intent of what the Buddha's getting at if you can see how to put it in order. And then you won't abandon the Dharma. The great wrongdoing won't happen. So many people these days are abandoning the Dharma. Even on all these apps, they're abandoning the Dharma. They're saying that this sutra is the best sutra, the rest are garbage. Or they're saying that this mantra is the best mantra. No. Mahayana is the best, Hinayana is terrible. Pali tradition is the best. Mahayana is bad. The Sanskrit tradition is the best. No, the Pali tradition is the best. If you read any of these traditions, if it was spoken by the Buddha, then you'll know exactly what the Buddha is talking about. If you know how to read the Buddha's texts through the Indian commentaries and Lama Tsongkhapa, Lord Atisha, and all these great masters up to Khensa Geshe Wandak and His Holiness. So just that's why we make this mandala offering to this beautiful field of merit, because we're so blessed that they're able to give us these like special glasses that allow us to read these texts so clearly and not have to have any kind of ambiguity or misapprehend the meaning of them. Because if we misapprehend the meaning of it, if it's, as the Buddha said, so subtle, we're not going to become enlightened. It's not going to work. You want it to not work? You want to take your chances? Not into it. All right. Fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the three times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. All-powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. Gari rawe gowe jinchan dir mendan dewa malu jongwe ne chen rezi wan tenzin gyatso yi Shabezi de badu den yoji. In all our lives, may we never be separated from Khenso Geshe Wandak, whether he or she chooses to emanate in the emanation body in our regular world where we could normally meet, or when we become Arya Bodhisattvas, may we meet in his or her form in the enjoyment body. And until then, may we always meet with this precious teacher, Khenso Geshe Wandak. And then when we become Buddhas, may we help Khenso Geshe Wandak in whatever form he or she is in to lead all beings to a state of Buddhahood. I want to thank all of you again for all the inspiration. You all know who you are. Thank you. Thank you so much. I hope that we can look at the mirror of the Dharma all week and change our minds and become closer to the state that we all want, complete happiness and freedom from suffering. Take care. See everybody later. I don't know how TikTok stayed on. It's so strange. It's only supposed to stay on an hour. Oh, hi, we're still here.